Chapter 1. The Bloody Birth of the Iron Grip. The central argument of this audit is that the enduring flaws within the American system are not random failures, but the logical outcome of structures designed to maintain power and profit, often invisible to the public eye. We began this investigation with the Epstein files, and followed that trail back to this point at the moment of modern organized crime's inception, a period of bloody transition that birthed a shadow governance powerful enough to neutralize the state, the iron grip of Lucky Luciano. The foundation of this empire was laid not in the Roaring Twenties, but in a brutal civil war fought in the back alleys and restaurants of New York City between 1930 and 31, known as the Castellammarese War. This was not merely a feud over territory, it was a philosophical clash between two approaches to power. On one side stood the Mustache Petes, the traditional old-world mafia bosses like Joe the Boss Masseria, who clung to Sicilian customs, ethnic segregation, and rigid, easily targetable leadership. On the other side were the Young Turks, a coalition led by Charles Lucky Luciano and his Jewish partners like Meyer Lansky. They viewed crime not as a matter of honor and tradition, but as a vast, profit-driven enterprise. The Young Turks saw the old ways as inefficient, expensive, and most importantly, bad for business. Luciano understood that absolute, visible power invites conflict and collapse. His true genius was not in winning the war, but in making it the last of its kind. He was initially Masseria's protege, but he saw that the boss's singular rule was a vulnerability. In the ultimate act of betrayal that set the stage for decades of systemic disloyalty, Luciano secretly struck a deal with Masseria's rival, Salvatore Maranzano. The resulting assassination of Masseria, ambushed in a Coney Island restaurant, was executed with such speed and cold planning that it immediately signaled a new era. The war, however, did not end right there. Maranzano, the victor, committed the fatal error of hubris, crowning himself capo di tutti capri, boss of all bosses. This restoration of the centralized, visible crown was different from Luciano's vision of a decentralized, durable financial network. When Maranzano foolishly drew up a list of Young Turks to purge, Luciano struck first and definitively. A hit team, reportedly disguised as treasury agents, an ironic choice that foreshadowed the crime family's future blurring of legal and illegal authority, murdered Maranzano in his office. With both old guard leaders eliminated, the war concluded, and the foundation of the modern criminal empire was poured. Luciano's great achievement was the establishment of the Commission. This was a revolutionary governing body comprised of the leaders of the five families and other national crime syndicates. It was a board of directors designed to mediate disputes, enforce contracts, and ensure stability across a criminal conglomerate focused entirely on wealth accumulation. In abolishing the crown, Luciano ensured that the power, the iron grip, was no longer held by a single man who could be killed or arrested, but by a diffuse, resilient corporate structure. This brings us to the most illuminating part of this founding story, the response of the American justice system. Through dozens of murders, the police and the courts were rendered virtually impotent. The assassins were never brought to justice. The victims, dismissed as gangsters killing gangsters, were often met with superficial investigation, if any at all. This inaction was not a mere lack of resources, it was a consequence of systemic corruption. In the New York of the 1930s, the political machine of Tammany Hall had allowed criminal influence to penetrate law enforcement and city government. Luciano and his allies used payoffs and political favors to buy protection, ensuring that the iron grip was not just a criminal structure, but a parasitic one that compromised the legitimate structures meant to stop it. The rule of silence, omerta, was certainly a factor, but the true guarantee of safety was the silence bought with cash inside police precinct houses and city halls. The complete lack of investigation into this campaign of wholesale assassination set a devastating precedent that organized crime could restructure itself violently, profit immensely, and do so with near total impunity. This precedent, that vast, systemic crimes could be hidden and protected by the very institutions sworn to prevent them, is the blueprint for understanding how inequality, economic exploitation, and civil rights injustices continue to plague America today. The iron grip, born of blood and betrayal, proved that a determined, well-financed, and well-connected network can operate above the law, creating a parallel system of power that is structurally immune to audit. This is the shadow we now turn to examine.